back to the Heck Fraud Show, everybody. We're here, and it is at last time for something we've been building up to for a while now. This is Too Much Christ.
Or Too Much Christ.
with an unexpected guest star.
Yes, we're having another one of my oft-mentioned roommates on the show.
Oft-mentioned? I feel so honored.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm Brady. For long-time listeners, maybe you've heard of my inflammatory opinions on most things. I'm here to share them now firsthand without the compromising filter that is Tyler to give you my opinions. So hello.
Well, he always tries to make people look good, so maybe he'll disappoint people. Who knows?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Are you one of our 7 viewers?
I can't say I am one of your 7 viewers, but that's good. That means there's someone out there who isn't on the immediate influence who is listening, who is not me.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're an
I'm
untapped
pretty
market.
sure that is the only people listening, but regardless.
We endured couple of movies here this week.
Endured is the operative word here.
Those were Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ and Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. And we're going to talk about those in great detail a little down the line here.
Splendorous detail.
I think we're going to do a little bit of what we've been watching before we dig into the meat here.
No pun intended.
No pun intended, Jesus.
No pun intended!
We're off to a great start.
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you get 4 people in a room. We haven't had 4 people on this podcast in a while.
That is true.
Yes, very true.
Ping pong.
But, Reed, you're often sort of shortchanged on what we've been watching. What have you been watching?
Hey, that's not fair to call me shortchanged, even though in this case you're probably right. But, so a couple of friends at college here in Bumfuck, Ohio, have been wanting me to watch this show for a long time. And I finally had a chance, or they had a chance to finally show me most of the episodes, and they don't take long. And of course, this is the medieval musical monstrosity ABC released, known as Gallivant. Those of you who've not heard of it.
I've heard of it. I never watched it.
I've seen like a few frames of it. That's all I'm willing to say I've seen of Gallivant.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Well, Reed, how is it?
Okay, well, let's break it down. It's cheesy and as rom-com-esque as you could picture a musical. Mm-hmm. So, check and check. There are knights. Check. Round table. Maybe. You have Weird Al Yankovic as a monk.
There it is.
Who instead of taking a vow of celibacy, took a vow of singing. So he's a singing monk. And he does do jazz hands. Yes. And then you have a lame protagonist and then some really compelling villains, which is the good part and also the bad part.
So is it good or is it bad?
It's compelling.
Okay, that's one way to...
option C. It's compelling. So they do have 2 seasons of this, and then they canceled it for reasons we will get into, only because it's incredibly meta. It's too meta to the point of uncanniness, especially in musical numbers, which I suppose is fine. So yeah, the first season was alright. You were introduced to Gallivant, who's a boring knight. We don't really care much about him, but we do care about the main antagonist, who is a sad is hilarious. And then we actually latch onto him a lot more as season 1 goes on, as opposed to Gallivant. Which makes season 2 all the more problematic, because this sees Gallivant and Richard, no longer king, team up, and then you start to blur the lines of who's really the protagonist here. Because you have, Gallivant, and then you have Richard, and they're kind of like sidekicks of one another, and they're both dominating at the same time.
Well, I guess I have to ask this question. Is it funny?
There's a lot of clean humor, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. But, yes.
Because plot construction aside, I think this kind of project lives or dies on whether the people behind it are actually funny.
I mean, it's mainly a bunch of relative nobodies. You do get some guest stars. There's Ricky Gervais, as well. He comes in, and then a couple of like British TV stars as well.
And
Because
John
of course
Stamos.
everyone has to have a British accent, except for the monks.
So you watched the whole show?
No, just 1.5 seasons.
Okay.
We
Of
stopped.
2, worth noting. Of 2 seasons.
Of 2 seasons. Which was about maybe 6 hours of watching.
And it sounds like it kind of tortured you.
Kind of.
So Gallivant, mildly torturous.
Go seek it out for yourself, friends.
I can't say I have much interest in Gallivant.
I watched the like opening song prologue that they put out online like before it aired, and I was like, oh, this is probably as good as it's gonna get.
Yeah. It doesn't. It seems like the sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of things out right now like that I feel like, oh, that's a good like YouTube video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, it's a show. Oh wait, they turned that in. There's a movie called Cockblockers. What the fuck?
Oh, and I didn't share my LA moment about cockblockers. This is funny, though. I saw the most LA thing ever. I was driving back from the other side of town the other day, and I just see a small Latino boy practicing counting his numbers at a bus stop on just a giant poster of cockblockers. He's just, like, counting the number of heads on the cockblockers poster. I'm just like, this is simultaneously everything I love and everything I hate about the place where I live.
Oh dearie.
That is about the most Los Angeles thing that I could picture.
Uno, dos, tres, seis cockblockers.
But Reed, is that all of you have witnessed this week?
Yes.
Can I talk about Annihilation?
Oh,
please do.
Yes.
Okay, Annihilation, the new Alex Garland picture. We all really love Ex Machina. Do you like Ex Machina, Brady?
Oh, I love Ex Machina. It was like tied for number 1 of mine that year.
Yeah, I think Movie Bob's description is what if robots sexy but good? And like I think it's really interesting. There's like a really fascinating Oscar Isaac performance in it. Alicia Vikander is extremely compelling. Like the subtle effects in it are unbelievable and wondrous to watch.
American Sweetheart, Donald Gleason.
Yeah. Yep. I think it is just a like wondrous little sci-fi movie. This is it feels like maybe Alex Garland has like a 13-year-old son who got like really high one day while reading like a biology textbook and was like, man, cells, they're all like the same. And, like,
Well, that turns into a Robert Rodriguez film real quick.
Man. But Alex Garland's also like a decent director and like an intriguing visual stylist. So like there's all this like this sumptuous like set design and really intriguing. I don't want to quite call it world building as it is about so much like creating like alien creatures almost. Mm-hmm. Like though half of it just looks like technicolored moss, but it's very interesting looking technicolored moss. But the thing about it is, like, I also describe it as, like, what if Heart of Darkness, like, stopped for, like, every, like, 10 pages to have, like, really trite dialogue about, like, the nature of going into Africa and colonialism? But that being said, the other portions are kind of Heart of Darkness, and it's okay.
But it's fine.
Rainbow lens flares, though.
I will say, like, the ending of this movie,
Ugh.
where they go into a lighthouse... And Natalie Portman sees. I'm just trying to because like there's a really distinct image of my mind. There's like this like Technicolor like version of like Natalie Portman that is formed, and it is copying her motions, except when she tries to leave the lighthouse. And there are things in there, I realize that this is something that has, like, some really ingenious visual creations and visual ideas. Mm-hmm. And I realize, like, if this movie was just, like, fucking, like, Natalie Portman, like, walking along, doing the Heart of Darkness thing, discovering, like mutated abominations and slowly piecing together what's going on, mm-hmm. which ultimately just sums up as Cancer Cloud. But if it was just like this visual creation, I get the feeling like this would be like a really nice, really great atmospheric horror film. Because like you're right, Tyler. Like some of the body horror is really intense and really interesting. Oscar Isaac is terrible looking at it, but Because like at one point, like they like cut open somebody's stomach, and then like Oscar Isaac just looks into the camera, and I swear to God, he has not had a more bored expression.
He was more invested in X-Men Apocalypse than he was in parts of this movie.
Apocalypse. He had things to do in X-Men Apocalypse.
Jeez. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think if this movie had just committed to being like a weird genre piece, I think it would have been a lot better. But no, we have to stop and spout philosophy every 10 minutes for
and it's not
some
just
reason.
Philosophy, it's really terrible philosophy. Like really like elementary grade, like insufferable philosophy.
It hangs its entire wardrobe on this like hat rack of philosophy that's made out of like Dixie cups. Like it has nothing to say. It's just like a hollow center that it's built around, so it just collapses in on itself like a dying star.
People don't commit suicide; they just self-destruct.
Oh man. What part of Natalie Portman is self-destructive in this movie? That is one thing I never
Natalie
got.
Portman, I can't really blame Natalie Portman because she's given nothing to work with here.
I don't blame her performance, but like the character, like, why does she have sex with the black guy? I don't know.
The movie doesn't care.
I don't know. Tell me more about it in the exposition boat.
With like woman who turns into plant.
Because why not? She willed herself into becoming a plant.
Because she cuts herself. That's why.
Oh,
She's self-destructive. Therefore, she turns into a plant. You see, it's this very like intricate philosophical like argument this movie's trying to build. Fuck this movie.
And Jane the Virgin's scared of bears, so she becomes a bear.
Okay, now that makes sense.
I think disappointment is like the best way to describe this thing because like clearly like Alex Garland has some like really intriguing visual creations and really intriguing filmmaking ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the script.
Yeah,
it's a Netflix movie, like through and through.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's a shame because like I don't think this movie is going to do well enough for him to be able to do something on this scale ever again.
Well, he won't get carte blanche, but
maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe
you need to stick him into like a franchise.
Maybe this is his life aquatic.
That could be true.
Maybe, hopefully.
Because like this is on like such a bigger scale than Ex Machina, which was just like here's like this like pseudo futuristic like mansion. You're with Oscar Isaac and some robots. Go.
Yeah.
That's like such a small movie, and that's part of why it's so great. Whereas this is just like exploding, like there's a giant cancer cloud in like on the like American South. What are we gonna do?
Which weird place, but I digress.
But he just wanted to do a swamp movie with some colorful moss.
But there are more moss than monsters in this film.
Oh man.
I actually watched a good movie too this week. I watched I can't pronounce this man's name. Like even by the standard of Russian names, this man has an impossible to pronounce name. But it's Leviathan.
Oh, we've been talking about that.
Yeah. Did it win the 2014?
It won Best Foreign Language. It did.
Yeah, this is a like really fascinating movie and a great like anomaly of a movie, which is like a Russian film that really analyzes what is wrong with Russia.
Ooh. With
like nepotism. Reed.
There you go.
Sure, he made the movie. And what it is, this is a film about like we have this setting in the great north of Russia where like nobody lives, and there's like this little rinky-dink town on the sea. And there's like this really corrupt mayor and this really corrupt like police system, and like they want to try and like take our titular, not titular, but our main character's house and build like they think the mayor's gonna build a dacha on there, but I think what they actually want to build is like a radio tower or something. There's something like cultural centerpiece for the town. This like man who owns a house, he brings in a friend from Moscow, and they try to like fight the like mayor, but then they find like it is just like running in quicksand. Like there's nothing they can really do, and it becomes pretty much a cross section of like of corruption and of like the role of the church and things of that sort, and just like how impossible change can be. And it sort of comes down as like something I find really interesting about Russia, which is like it's like the evil empire, but it's really bad at being the evil empire. Like the mayor of the town named Vadim is like fat and like really incompetent and just bumbles about everywhere, and like he doesn't quite know what to do with like this Moscow lawyer who keeps like bugging him. So he goes to the church and the church tells him, like, you need to be harder on him. So because of what the church told him, he takes the lawyer, throws him out in the middle of nowhere, and puts a gun to his head and tells him to go home. And there's also, it's also just, like, gorgeous film. Like, the filmmaking of this is just unbelievable. There's, like, a great, like, existential dread that circles over all of it. Like, it seems that it is as visually, like, gray and downtrodden as all, like, the morality of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also just, like, there's some gorgeous sunset photography, and I'm a sucker for all that. And it almost makes me want, if it wasn't so horrible, I'd go vacation there. It's absolutely gorgeous. And there's just, like, wonderful visual creations of, like, I'm going to call it the titular Leviathan, which is, like, this whale carcass that is on a beach, which I'm pretty sure, like, if you've ever seen a still from the movie, you've seen that.
Yeah, like the poster.
And sometimes it's just like the son of the man who owns the house, Roma, just sitting there pondering life and so forth. And it's a film about, like, marital strife, as, like, the, like, wife of this man who owns the house cheats on him with the Moscow lawyer, and there's a whole big meringue about that. If you are fascinated with Russia like I am, I think you will get quite a lot out of this movie, and it is a really, I can't say accurate because I'm not Russian, but, like, it seems to be a quite, like, pointed depiction of the Russian social strata, especially in, like, these rural places where just, like, nobody goes and, like, nobody knows about, and, like, it is pretty much like it's almost Lord of the Flies up there.
Well, an easy way to figure out how accurate it is the guy who made it still alive? So, because if he's not, then you know it's accurate.
Well, I can't speak to that, but I'm pretty sure he's still alive.
For now.
But there was, like, great that, like, the north of Russia didn't want to show up because they said it makes the north look bad, and there was, like, a lot of, like, pushback of people saying this makes Russia look bad on, like, the great scale, especially because it was nominated for an Oscar. And it is also, like, one of those movies where it says, like, yeah, this goes all the way up to the top. There's, like, a bunch of, like, visual shots of, like, there would be, like, a portrait of Putin in the background as, like, the mayor is, like, tearing into his, like, quote-unquote cabinet saying, like, if I go, you all go.
Oh, dude.
Wow.
I'm so down.
I really love this movie. I found it, like, really fascinating. But it also makes you really depressed. So, take it that.
Like all great world cinema.
That's Russian film. It did not win, by the way.
It didn't? I could have sworn it did.
No, it didn't.
I knew it was one of the most, like, public ones.
Yeah. What did win that?
Especially because, like, Russian film just doesn't talk about Russia all that often. Like, a lot of Russian film is about, like, hey, look at Moscow, the show place, the post-Soviet, like, Golden Child. It's very little of it actually shows, like, places like the Great North and things of that sort.
Yeah.
And also, I think it also kind of displays the explanation for the sort of, like, why, like, Russian corruption is just so crass and out there in the open, which is very simple, because they can.
Yeah. Who's
going to stop them? So, yeah, I highly recommend Leviathan to all of you because I know I assume all of us have some interest in Russia at this juncture.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I think we just needed a good nudge to watch this movie.
Yeah, we were talking about it, like, yesterday.
Yeah.
It's really gorgeous and really fascinating. It is really, like, slow paced, not unlike the other film I saw of his, Elena. It is really slow paced and deliberate. So it is also, like, a really rich and rewarding watch. The last film I'm going to talk about is none of these things. It's Mom and Dad.
Do you know what
film
year?
That got so much publicity that, like, when Matthew, Alex, and I tried to watch it, we couldn't come to a consensus of when it came out, and we could not find anything else the director had done. It's a horror comedy about like, this really vapid, detestable, like, suburbia, where just one day parents start killing their children. And it turns into, like, a horror, like an absurdist horror piece about, like, parents, like, trying to kill their children in new and creative ways. Such as, at one point, like, the children lock themselves in the basement, so the parents unhook the stove, take a garden hose to the gas pipe, and try to gas them out of the basement. And this could all be very funny. There is such an absurdity to it. I realize that this could all be just, like, really funny. The problem is that, like, the filmmakers behind it seem to forget it's a comedy. Because, like, it is, like, it has all over, like, wonky, like, sound design that tries to, like, disable you. It has, like, if it were a different movie, it'd be a really interesting visual style where everything's blown out. There's lots of like harsh lighting. In some ways, it's a very pretty movie, but there's like such a tonal dissonance between what I'm seeing and I'm seeing Nicolas Cage try to gas his kids. Like that just doesn't work. And it also has like Nicolas Cage like destroying a pool table and singing the Hokey Pokey and doing lots of meme screams.
Oh, good.
Like if you're just here, like you just want to see like Nicolas Cage chew some scenery, I guess this will give you that fix. But there's a lot of better places you can go for that, such as The Wicker Man.
Dog Eat Dog, my personal favorite.
I've never seen Dog Eat Dog.
Oh. Willem Dafoe. Man, that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Go on.
But yeah, like I kind of want to talk about this because like in some ways I only want to compare this to like Get Out in the same way that they're both horror comedies. That's the only where I want to put like Get Out in this, because at one point in Mom and Dad, the grandparents come into the house and they try to kill like Nicolas Cage and so forth because of course everyone's trying to kill their kids. Of course, and it's really funny because like the grandparents are hamming it up, and there's at one point where they just stop and say, "Oh, hi kids, how you doing?" And they just start killing Nicolas Cage again. And there's like, like if this had more of a progression and it just kept getting more and more absurd, I think this could be something that was like really entertaining to watch, because like Get Out like really ramps itself up as it goes along, and it gets more and more absurd. But also, Jordan Peele's a real filmmaker. So it was a fascinating watch because like it was often like we were unable to tell at times like, is this satire? Are they incompetent? Is this comedy? Are we laughing at it because it's funny, or are we laughing at it because it's bad? And like and then there are just some inexplicable things that happen in this movie, like a 7-year-old in his underwear imitating Taxi Driver. Insofar as like it's like him like looking in the mirror using the gun. I just do not know what they were thinking when they made this. I don't know what budget it had, because it looks like it has money behind it. Like, it doesn't look like a really cheap film. But also, we don't know when it came out because no one cared. So, like, I'm just curious, like, what the fuck happened here? Like, I'm almost curious to see, like, a behind the, like, scenes on this. To see, like, okay, whose idea was it to have Nicolas Cage do this? Whose idea of it was to edit Nicolas Cage destroying a pool table right in the middle of him trying to kill his kids? And like also, the like editing is bizarre and bewildering, but it's something. Not good.
Yeah.
It's not even worth taking a piss on. But it was a fascinating watch in a room full of people who like to laugh at bad movies. So like, if you just kind of want to sit in a room and be like, what the fuck am I watching? Mom and Dad. Maybe this is the film for you.
According to Wikipedia, it was theatrically released in January. So
This year?
This year.
Fuck you, it's January.
Awesome. So that's Mom and Dad, I guess.
That's Mom and Dad. And I feel like it is worth talking about because I still don't know what to think of it, really. And there's not a lot of films that do that, to be honest.
Oh, boy.
So, that's pretty much all I'm going to stop at this week. If I come up with, like, things in my mind, maybe I'll talk about them.
All right. Well.
On to us.
Yes.
We have a pretty similar diet, so.
Yeah.
Well, you do live together.
We do, and we take all of our classes together.
I have a lot of things on the list here. I'm sure I'll save some of them. We can go off what we have overlap on.
Such as?
Well,
you want to start with the fun one we just did?
Yeah, sure.
That's a pleasant one.
We just came back from showing of Wes Anderson's new film, Isle of Dogs.
Ooh, apparently that film isn't coming to Columbus until April the 5th, and I want to fucking kill someone.
Well, it's good.
Okay,
I
expected as such.
I would not say it's top tier Wes Anderson, but I kind of was not expecting it to be. I think coming off of a masterpiece like Grand Budapest, you almost have to, take a step down and kind of...
Yeah, I'd argue like Grand Budapest is one of the greatest comedies ever made, but...
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you on that, but... Yeah, this movie, we kind of agreed that it felt like one of the more conventional movies he's made.
I would even argue maybe his most conventional, at least from a plotting perspective, which is odd. Not what I expected with a trash island full of stray dogs, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd argue, like, Darjeeling, of the ones I've seen, I've argued Darjeeling is the most conventional, because it has, like, the thing of, like, white people go to, like, exotic place to fix themselves.
Yeah.
Which is, like, the most conventional thing Wes Anderson has done in my eyes. Does Isle of Dogs do anything as conventional as that?
Boy and his dog.
Well, but it's also... They also kind of sold it like that, so...
Yeah, it's a pretty, like, classic, like, straightforward, like, story and story structure. Although the way he fills out the details is, like, you know, one of those classic Wes Anderson things.
That's where the strength comes from, as in any of his.
Yeah. No, it's beautifully animated. The design of it all I really loved, for the most part.
I will say, like, just from, like, looking at the trailers and so forth, there's something kind of ethnographic about it in a way, and I'd be curious to see it, just, like, to see how that pans out.
It is kind of... I mean, I wouldn't say it's, like, the most authentic portrayal of Japanese culture I've ever seen. But, I mean, a lot of people are accusing it of, like, some really, like, blatant cultural appropriation, and
that's inaccurate.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but I'm just curious, like, what, like, its view of, like, what its vision of Japan is, and what that says about its view of Japan.
It's actually very much... It doesn't really go into Japan as a nation so much. It's pretty central on this, like, trash island, and I think he kind of was smart to write himself into that, so he doesn't have to, like, make grand sweeping statements on the entire country.
So he doesn't have to be like, oh, look, it's Wes Anderson's Japan.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely worth seeing. It's a good movie. It's oddly... I thought it was maybe his, like, most obviously dark movie in a while. I mean... Grand Budapest, like, has that darkness and melancholy, but, like, this movie has, like, a lot of, like, really dark humor in it.
I don't agree so much on that.
Yeah, well, like, Grand Budapest is a film that plays up, like, Nazis as a joke and a punchline.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. Until it's not.
Right.
Until it's not, which is what's great about that movie.
Yeah, very true.
No, I don't know. Isle of Dogs... It feels like a different mode for him. It feels like he's doing something different. I'm sure if you've read any of the reviews, they all have said this. Like, it's his most obviously political movie. Maybe his first obviously political movie, which is odd. I wouldn't say it totally works, but it's interesting to see him, like, trying some new things. I support that, and you know, I'm more curious to see what he's going to do next. I still think that this is a new and interesting thing for him to be trying, and I don't know. If it's not, like, at the top of his filmography, it's still a delightful entry in the Wes Anderson canon.
Certainly worth seeing.
Is this... Oh, sorry, Brady.
I was just saying, but yeah, not better than his bad movies, but only just so. Like, I'd say, like, I think I rank it like the bottom of his good movies.
Well, I'm also someone who likes Life Aquatic, so take anything I say with a grain of salt. Is this a kid's movie?
No.
Okay, I'm curious.
Only in the same way that, like, Mr. Fox is a kid's
Fantastic Mr. Fox is definitely a kid's movie. And,
I disagree with you.
You can kind of grade it on that scale, but...
Well, I would say it's even less of a kid's movie than Mr. Fox. Like, there's a lot of, like, you know, it's nothing, like, explicit, but I don't think he was, like, looking to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah, it's something that would definitely be harder for kids to grasp, I would think.
Yeah.
So he's not catering to them.
Because I'm kind of, like, curious, like, kind of what expectations I should have going into. Because on one hand, I'm going up into his first film since Grand Budapest. And another hand, it's a stop-motion animated film and his first since 2009. So what do I take from that? It sounds fascinating, and I'm really excited to see it.
Yeah, definitely see it and form an opinion, because it's worth seeing. Of course it is. It's Wes Anderson.
Yeah. And it's another thing where, like, I've become fascinated by, like, what movies contemporary directors choose to make, like, at this point in their careers.
True.
And this is, like, I think interesting to reflect on, like, why he made this movie and why he made it now.
Yeah. Because I think you're right.
Wes Anderson could do whatever the fuck he wants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if he could do whatever he wanted, I think he was smart to know that he shouldn't shoot for anything as high as Grand Budapest so quickly after Grand Budapest. Mm-hmm. Like, he's given himself the time to, like, build up some stock and, like, really make something great later down the road.
Okay. What else have y'all watched?
Well, we should really start talking about Christ movies soon, so I'm not going to go into too many of these. let's see. We watched Bertolucci's The Conformist
Oh, we did.
together.
We did watch that.
Ooh, what'd you think of The Conformist?
It was good.
I really liked it.
It was good.
I really love that movie.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's great looking. It's a fun little. Well, it's a very compelling character study.
It's a really interesting view of fascism.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated with fascism, so hence I adore The Conformist.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating to see a character who kind of reacts to fascism in that way.
I always said that after watching it that if I were to ever make a James Bond movie, that would be my point of reference, would be The Conformist. I think there's a lot of like interesting stuff in there with like double crossing and like the nature of like secret operation and then just how it takes a toll on a person. But
And then
yeah, that movie also has a scene I'll never forget of like somebody like saying, "Don't you fucking talk about Mussolini again," and beating him at like I think it's like a wedding or something of that sort.
yeah.
And then finally, we watched Elia Kazan's America, America,
Hooray.
which is a movie that Kazan wrote, produced, and directed himself.
How many minutes is it, Tyler?
174. Brady liked this movie a lot more than I did.
Oh, I did like this movie.
Sing unto its merits, Brady.
So
Because I don't have much to say.
basic plot, a Anatolian Grecian boy really wants to go to America. That's it. That's go. And so it's just like him trying to hustle his way across the European continent to try and get to America. And I don't know. I liked it. I think it's more interesting to hear why Tyler didn't like it. Because, I mean, it's a good story about a guy who wants something. And I think that the most interesting part about it is it's 3 hours long. And the whole point is he gets a lot of distractions thrown his way. About like, oh, you could like stay here and do this instead of going to America. And no matter how good things possibly could be for him, he's like, no, I'm going to America. I don't care about anything else. And I found that really compelling in the character. But I also know that Tyler did not like the central character.
Oh,
Well,
man.
you're setting up something that like might be up my alley. Tyler, tear it down.
Well, it's... I don't know if you would like it or not. It's so weird. The lead actor, I describe him as Greek James Dean.
But better than James Dean.
Well... his whole like obsessive focus, I just thought that made him like less interesting as a character. He was such a shallow like person to hang a movie on, I thought. Which I don't know, like maybe, you know, I can't really speak to the immigrant experience. Like maybe
oh can't you?
this is accurate. Like when you want to go to America, this is all you care about. I mean, obviously it varies from person to person, but whatever. I just was not engaged by that, and like many of the situations he like got himself into, I didn't think were that interesting. Like that whole like 15-minute sequence of him with the guy who like just took advantage of him the whole time. I was not really into that.
What about that middle hour when he fell in with the rich family? That was fun.
The middle hour where he falls in with the rich family, I thought was the best part of the movie. I actually enjoyed that quite a bit because his cousin, who he kind of ends up living with at a certain point, you know, to help him help the family get more money, that he helps him. It's a little mini My Fair Lady in the middle of this movie. He like dresses him up all proper and has him like get engaged to this rich family's daughter, but he has no interest in doing so. He still just wants to get to America.
Yeah, let me. I'll try to speak like devil's advocate for a second because like I am not an immigrant, nor have I even seen this film, so like I can't really speak to this directly. But part of like immigration and going to a new place is part of what is partially idolizing this place and creating this image of it. Like this is the new life I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the promised land for me. So like the kind of like myth making which like this main character appears to be doing kind of seems accurate to some immigrant experiences. I'm certainly there'll be some who said like, oh, this is rubbish. I'd go with the rich family and stay forever.
Well, the thing is, it's important to remember this was made in the early '60s by a man who like he's not an immigrant. Oh, he was an immigrant. Yes, Kassan was.
Was he born in Greece? I think he was.
I think he was. But so in his mind, and especially in a phase like before major postmodern filmmaking, like the idolized America is the America we see. Like he has to like hustle and like, you know, dig through garbage when he's in the old country to like just to live, and then he gets to America and he's just like shining shoes and whistling and just like throwing the rag over his shoulder and like smiling to the camera. So it definitely doesn't like challenge that in a way that maybe a more interesting and definitely more modern movie would. But I mean, it's fun to see a guy try for what he wants and then get it at the end.
Like maybe Don Bluth's An American Tail.
I did say that the streets were made of cheese about halfway through the movie. So.
We'll have to do a Don Bluth episode at some point, but
Oh, boy.
Definitely sounds better than Far and Away.
Oh, yeah, it
Would you
is.
say it's far and away better?
No, but at least Tom Cruise isn't doing a weird Irish accent. I don't know. America is something.
I like it.
Yeah. Apparently,
I can't say I'd go out and see it because I don't often have 3 hours on my hands.
yeah, it's tough to make time. For,
Yeah, goodness. If
such
we
a
didn't
thing.
have to watch it, I don't know if I would have watched it. But
yeah.
I'm not angry that I saw it.
I'm not angry that I saw it, but
Just disappointed.
a little disappointed, perhaps. But I think we should get to the main event here.
Oh boy!
This is what all the people came to hear about.
Christ.
Too much, Christ.
Too much Christ.
So
Too much
should
Christ.
we start with
Pick one?
Last Temptation, because I think that provides an interesting framework for talking about the other one.
Oh, certainly. Like, I think a lot of this discussion is going to be comparing the two in some format.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a movie that's inevitable for Martin Scorsese because he's one of the most rigorously Catholic, mainstream Catholic filmmakers out there.
Right.
Sure.
Which you wouldn't
So-
think by watching many of his other movies.
Wolf of Wall Street, anyone?
No.
But-
But I think it's also interesting. I think at one point, I think this was in an interview with Ebert, or it might have just been an anecdote that Ebert said that Martin Scorsese believes he's going to hell for some of his rules he's broken for the church.
Yeah.
So Catholic guilt is dripping all over all his work, and I think Catholic guilt is fascinating. So
Right.
henceforth, The Last Temptation.
And so you have the ultimate Catholic guilt movie, The Last
Yeah,
Temptation
yeah.
of
The
Christ.
second ultimate Catholic guilt. We'll get to
Well,
number one later.
That's more of a Protestant guilt
Oh,
movie,
no,
I
I would
think.
agree with you there.
Yeah, that's more.
yeah.
We'll get to that.
But okay, so Last Temptation of Christ is a movie Scorsese tried to make it a few times before it actually ended up getting made, and there was some cast reshuffling. Pontius Pilate, this is just a fun little fun fact that I love. Pontius Pilate was going to be played by Sting before David Bowie came on board.
Who?
Well, I
sells
didn't
that
know
role?
David Bowie was in the movie before Pontius Pilate came on, and me and my girlfriend were like, "Wait, that's David? Holy shit, that's David Bowie! What movie am I watching?" Because it's oddly also the most '80s movie Scorsese's ever made.
Oh, that Peter Gabriel score.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and everyone has '80s hair.
Oh, that Harvey Keitel haircut's working overtime.
Yeah. Based not on the Bible, but on a book.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
A novel dramatizing the life and times of Jesus Christ in a more, shall we say, skeptical fashion.
Humanist way.
Yeah.
A humanist way,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
You have Willem Dafoe as Jesus, kind of struggling with himself and with what he feels his purpose is.
And his amateur carpentry skills.
Yeah, and also kind of like Jesus by way of a used car salesman. In a really interesting way, especially the way because William Dafoe is doing William Dafoe, he's not doing a big accent or anything of that sort. So when he starts preaching, it sounds like he's trying to sell a car.
Yeah,
or something of that sort.
it is very downplayed.
I think that, if you're going to make a movie about Jesus, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
I thought this movie was really incredible. It's a triumph, on, an aesthetic filmmaking level, as Scorsese movies tend to be. But just, the way it treats, Christ as a character and as a person, struggling with his faith, struggling with his place in the world, that has an incredible resonance to it that I,
Yeah.
fully bought into. I think it's going to be hard to kind of keep our, personal religious histories out of this, because it really, at least for me, because it really, impacts the way I saw these two movies, particularly.
Yeah, especially Passion for me. But I can't say I was in love with it, but there was a lot of things this does with Christ mythology that are just really interesting and really compelling on both an aesthetic level and just on a pure philosophy level.
Mm.
I think there isn't a better scene of somebody literally telling Jesus it doesn't matter what life you actually lived, the symbol you created is far more important.
That scene with Harry Dean Stanton, toward the end of the movie,
Oh, yeah.
that I just, I was like, okay, yeah, there it is.
Win.
That's a
You've done it.
masterpiece of scene.
Yeah. I mean, that whole, last sequence, when it came around and, like, you know, the little girl comes and takes him down off the cross, I was kind of like, okay, I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, but it tricks you just enough that you're like, oh.
Well, at a certain point, I was like, I just told my girlfriend, like, I never thought I'd be in a Jesus movie and thinking, like, you know, I'm not quite sure where this is taking me. But here I am, like, a little girl takes Jesus off the cross. I'm like, okay, movie, what do you got?
It's gonna be some Inglourious Bastards, like, alternate history, oh Jesus, and I'm just like, okay, let's see. And
Where, like, hell is him going to paradise.
Yeah. That's something I didn't really think about. Yeah, like, hell for him is, like, going to paradise and being
happy.
You know, being released of all his obligations and
having a family of all things.
Yeah.
Two families.
He just has sex in this movie.
He does.
Oh my, yeah. And, you know, the reason this movie was super controversial is super controversial. I mean, you want to tell that Willem Dafoe anecdote?
Yeah, so I had the good graces to see Willem Dafoe speak in person a couple months ago, and they showed a clip from this film, The Lazarus Scene, and he was talking about his history with the production of it, and he says that he still to this day doesn't get some jobs on occasion because he made this movie. Like, he was doing some deal with a production company, and there was, like, some ultra-religious guy at the top, and he just goes, no, I don't want to work with Willem Dafoe because he made Last Temptation, and
this is literally a character people have started wars over.
Yeah.
So, like the moment you try to make this is why there aren't as many Jesus movies as you might think they are, because, like, the moment you try to take that on, someone's going to be coming after you.
Well, that's part of the course with any art, and especially with this, so...
Yeah, and it's also just, like, fascinating, like, how they also kind of deal with, like, the mythology of mythology.
Yeah, the way that mythology is constructed and, like, you know, what it does for people. I found all of that stuff, like, deeply fascinating. Like,
yeah, and also Jesus as a revolutionary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A revolutionary leading against, like, the Jewish authorities and, like, the Roman authorities.
It's hard to fathom that kind of thing now, you know, with Christianity's, like, 2,000-year history now as...
It was rough and tumble at one point, man. It was making up as we go along in the old Jesus days.
God, they have, like, the disciples come back as scarred as they would have been after, like, the Romans descended upon them, saying, like, look, man, you kind of fucked us.
And I think, like, one of the most, like, compelling things in the movie is, like, that, you know, his interactions with Harvey Keitel as Judas... where, like, he's like, what are you doing? Like, you've changed, like, what you're saying, like, 5 times. Are we, like, marching in to, like, kill all the Romans and take over? Like, are we going off the whole peace and love thing? Like, I don't know what you want me to do here.
Yeah. Harvey Keitel as Judas is fascinating in this movie.
And I love the whole thing where, like, Willem Dafoe, like, pretty much tells him, like, you have to betray me.
Yeah.
Like, you read
which is apparently, like, something, like, Bible historians actually, like preach for sometimes, is that, like, Jesus actually told Judas to betray him.
Well, because if you read, like, the biblical accounts, it's like, Jesus is saying from the very beginning, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna die, by the way.
Yeah.
And, like, you read accounts like fucking Dante's Inferno, where Judas is being chewed by Satan, and you're kind of like, well, guys, like, wasn't this your plan? Like, I'm not sure Judas deserves this. And so, to see the way this movie treats him, I think, is extremely refreshing.
Yeah, and fair.
Oh yeah, it might be the best Judas we've ever seen.
Yeah. I would posit that.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't...
and he's also a ginger, so...
Ooh, that perm.
There's a lot of, I guess, like, maybe that's, like, my issue with the movie, is that, like, it is... We are talking about, like, all this, like, fascinating, like, myth-making that the movie's doing, and that's all really interesting. But it's also a movie that has a Peter Gabriel score and, like, really weird editing, and, like, David Bowie comes in at one point. I think even by the standards of Scorsese, I think it's a bit sloppier than in most of his work. It doesn't seem to quite have that same polish that a lot of his other works do.
Well, it's one that I think he couldn't afford with the production level, because I think with the nature of the project, I've heard that, like, that's Willem Dafoe was saying this, that, like, they had to do it kind of quick and dirty just because of what the movie was.
And if anything, that quick and dirtiness does lend it a charm, almost. almost.
It does.
Because like just about every like biblical thing is like given such like this impossible like Hollywood style sheen.
Right.
That like to see this is like really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I was super into its kind of like down and dirty aesthetic. You know, I don't know, that all worked for me.
Yes.
Garrett, what did you think of the film?
Okay, so I didn't know what to think of this movie other than, hey, William Dafoe is Jesus. What could go wrong? Actually, nothing apparently goes wrong. It actually goes pretty well. So there's that opening quote, and I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. It's from a book. It's from the source material. I don't care. Let's get on. And then we start hearing the score, and then I'm thinking, ooh, are we actually going to get accurate setting? Actually accurate, like, down-to-earth environment? And then we actually do, which is refreshing.
But like,
and they managed
this
to
isn't like
carry it
dragged, but in front of like this giant colonnaded like courtyard or something like that.
Yeah, I did think the paradise in the log cabin looked too Appalachian.
Yeah, well, I think like that's just kind of what's going to happen when you try to make a movie quick and dirty. Is that like, okay, we have these locations, go make it look like Judea.
Apparently, it was all filmed in Morocco.
Yes, filmed entirely on location in Morocco. So I guess I don't know. I guess I'm sensing that I liked this movie like more than all of the rest of you.
I liked it a lot, but it's like
I certainly see where you're coming from. As this is like an incredible work.
Yeah.
I think maybe like I just have less patience for like Jesus myth making because I had it's possible that I had a slightly less religious upbringing than you.
Yeah. Well,
so like I'm just kind of like while watching it, I'm also kind of going like, okay, like, why do I care so much about like Jesus?
I mean, I can't really blame you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, since, you know, Christianity has like saturated the culture and government of this country in like
a very unappealing way.
A very unappealing way. Yeah. But coming from like, you know, I went to church every week for like most of my childhood. And, you know, having now like emerged and like standing outside that environment, and really having come to, you know, shake up my perspective on religion in a lot of ways. I think that, you know, this is something that I've always wanted to see. Like this movie is like the perfect, for me, you know, skeptical but fair take on Christianity and Christian mythology and Jesus as a man.
It's the Jesus movie that takes Jesus the task. And like, that's worth celebrating.
Yeah, like Scorsese is interested in taking him like very seriously and in like dramatizing the story as like not realistically but like as I think honestly as possible.
Well, I think that the strength that Scorsese has when it comes to his religious epics, because I am on the record as very much loving Silence. I don't know where anyone else falls on it.
I like Silence too.
I love Silence. I like Silence more than this one. It's where I should say, but I think
so as well.
I think the thing that really makes Scorsese strong as a religious filmmaker in the ones I've seen of his is the fact that for someone who is so, you know, devoutly Catholic and believes in Catholic ideals so strongly, he's willing to incorporate that doubt and the skepticism that so many people in this vein of filmmaking aren't willing to do. Hint, we'll get to that later. But yeah, so he really is willing to question the faith in an important way that I think is the only way you can have a interesting narrative, especially a character piece like this. And that's where I think Silence is strong, and I think that's where this one is strong too. And that he's willing to like look at what has been told to him for so long and think, well, wait, what about this? What about that? And it ultimately does, you know, weigh out with his Catholic beliefs in the end, but the fact that he's willing to challenge it is what makes it so interesting and engaging.
I think what makes like Silence stronger for me is that like Silence is even more skeptical and even more like, hey, what the fuck is this? Are these myths we're like touting all about? And what the fuck actually even is faith? Whereas like this kind of takes like God is speaking to Jesus. That is like the ground level. That's the foundation we're working at here. Jesus talks to fire and it's Satan. It's all taken seriously. And I have no real problem with that, but that is just like it does take this there is a certain amount of earnestness to this movie.
At least
and that is interesting.
At least he thinks it's Satan. Like, I don't think this movie ever like definitively comes down on like this is all real or I do think what it lands on is like kind of more validating for religion than kind of the furor around this movie would suggest.
Oh, certainly. It's still made by a Catholic.
Yeah. I don't know.
A very devout Catholic.
My thing with Silence is that, like, I would say that, like, yes, it throws, like, more challenges, like, to faith at its characters, but I think ultimately, when it does land on, like, actually, like, faith is good and religion is good, and to me, that felt like a lot more of kind of a cop-out. I don't know. That was my major issue with Silence,
Yeah,
other than, like, how...
Not to go into a huge tangent with Silence, but I do also argue that, like, Silence kind of sees religion more as, like, an ambassador for general culture more than, like, faith in itself, though, like, I can certainly agree that, like, there are more conservative tinges in Silence than, like, maybe something like a devout, like a full atheist would have made.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think... I said this after we finished it.
I was going to say.
Yeah, like, Silence is about religious faith, and Last Temptation is about religious doubt.
Yes, that's a very accurate depiction.
And a struggle of doubt within an environment of faith versus vice versa. So that's why that is what's interesting. Everyone around is like, so you're like Jesus, right? And he's like, yes,
maybe.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of. I hear voices, man. I don't know. I'm trying. I don't know whether I'm supposed to sell like this model of Christianity to you.
And I can't build very good tables yet. The guy down the road is still better at carpentry than I am.
Oh goodness!
I got very hung up on the carpentry.
I can only build beams for crosses.
This is certainly. I think this is like the best Jesus movie. Like if that's what you're looking for, I think that's like something we can all agree on.
Definitely, that's the best I've seen. Although I haven't seen Son of God.
Yeah.
So.
I have. This is the best Jesus movie. I forgot. Good Christ! I was gonna bring that up at the beginning. Yeah, Son of God is horrible.
I've never seen Son of God.
Don't. There's no reason. Especially if you've seen Passion of the Christ. Son of God is basically just Passion of the Christ light. With more, like, magical realism. And I think there's no better way to segue into the Passion of the Christ.
Good fuckity lord. Okay. Where in the name of the Almighty do we begin?
Well, let's begin at the beginning. This movie throws you right the fuck in.
Yeah.
We open in Fern Gully.
Side note, I don't think they, like, display the title of this movie at all in the film, which, like, why would they need to?
You know why you're here.
You do know why you're here.
Yeah, I think you're right. The end credits is the only time it comes up.
Yeah. So this movie is, one of the most infamous things ever put to screen, I think.
Certainly.
Yeah, one of the most infamous things that come out of the 2000s.
Yeah. Still the highest grossing R-rated movie in North America, I believe.
And highest grossing independent, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I heard.
Good grief. All right, so this is Mel Gibson's grand, glorious attempt to put, like, the central event of Christian history on screen for all to see. And for some reason, the Christian community embraced it with open arms and would not let go.
My From Country Girlfriend said it was kind of like they saw it as like, oh, like it shows like the sheer torture of Jesus. They took it as like sincere historical document almost.
I mean, I think that's what Mel Gibson wanted, and
it's about love, but yeah,
it's good grief. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna read this because
this is important framing for the film.
This is I was looking at the like Wikipedia page for this movie, and
you need to take your eyes off the screen in some capacity.
Oh yeah, I think like at one point, like me and my girlfriend started talking about Mecca or something.
Under themes, director Mel Gibson says, "This is a movie about love, hope, faith, and forgiveness. Jesus died for all mankind, suffered for all of us. It's time to get back to that basic message. The world has gone nuts. We could all use a little more love, faith, hope, and forgiveness."
4 words I would not use to describe this film in any order. Love, hope, faith, forgiveness.
Maybe Mel Gibson shouldn't be allowed outside. He doesn't mind making movies. Especially, this is a film where it is really hard to disconnect the ideology of the people who made it from the actual film.
Oh, certainly.
Well, I think when you're watching a movie, like, it is important to take the intent of the filmmaker into account. However, if they fail in that intent, the mere fact that they intended it, like, should not excuse them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Mel Gibson is an infamous anti-Semite, and there's a lot of anti-Semitism in this movie.
Oh, what? The Jews come off great in this film.
Oh, man.
Gosh.
Yeah,
Oh, man.
it's like there's a lot to be said about like, oh, the Bible has this stuff, but like what happens that this movie places cinematic coding and cinematic language atop of what like messages might already be problematic messages might already be in that book,
Yeah.
and it just comes off showing Judaism as satanic, and like it is one of the most clearest submissions to the myth that like the Jews killed Jesus. That is one of the very foundations of modern anti-Semitism, and I can't really forgive any movie for doing that.
It goes so
Yeah.
far as to excuse Pontius Pilate in service of putting more responsibility on the Jewish community.
Man.
So
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Pontius Pilate in this movie just spends it going like, I don't want to kill this guy, but hey, these Jews are really insane.
They're making me do it, man.
If I could just like, this is gonna be like my one defense of the movie, which is
Okay.
that I do think its depiction of Pontius Pilate is actually pretty good.
it's interesting.
Yeah. Pontius Pilate is the only human in the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, all the time, like, when I would, like, hear the story of the Passion, like, from the Bible, I'd be like, I feel like Pontius Pilate, like, gets a bad rap. Like, he didn't want to do this. Like, his wife was like, yo, don't kill this guy. And he was like,
and there's a lot
okay.
of like, hey man, you're gonna create martyrs out of this, like actual state building built into the Bible.
yeah, but, like, sheer mob mentality forced him to be like, okay, like, you guys wanted this. Like,
You can do it.
you can, I'm putting this on you. And I think that is vastly more interesting than anything else in this movie.
It is the only
But the movie
interesting
also then makes the mistake of like coding the Roman soldiers doing the act as like demonic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped
and, like-
partway through and I was like, is any human capable of laughing this much while whipping another human?
Also, Jesus isn't a character in this movie.
No.
No, not
really
at all.
weird.
You want to say that Jim Caviezel, like, gives a good performance, but he's not asked to do anything except, like, stand around and
Suffer.
suffer. Yeah.
They cast a man purely on the ability to take a good punch.
I jokingly said near the beginning, like, because he gets his eye swelled shut like 20 minutes
Yeah.
into this movie, and I'm like, how can I relate to a character if I can't see both his eyes? And that was oddly prophetic, no pun intended.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. The language of this movie has, like, Jim Caviezel fucking, like, truncated to, like, his hands, to his legs, to, like, his back during whipping. We rarely see, like, an untruncated Jesus in the movie until we see him on the fucking cross.
Yeah.
Like, he is meat from a cinematic perspective.
Yeah.
He is.
And what happens is the result of that is that like you notice the coding of the Jews even more because Jesus has just been like pushed to the side of his own story.
Well,
It's not his story.
I
It's,
feel like
yeah.
there's like 20 minutes in the middle of this movie where like Jesus is not on screen at all. Am I wrong about this? Like,
That
Where?
might be right.
like they just cut where they have all the Pontius Pilate stuff and like, you know, him like interacting with the Jewish priests
Oh,
and all
yeah.
that stuff. Like, yeah, Jesus is like a side character in the Passion of the Christ. Like, what the
Yeah,
fuck
and
are
it's
you
also,
doing,
like,
Mel Gibson?
I'm gonna reiterate this. There is over an hour where the
Yeah.
only thing Jesus does is get the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
That's the only thing Jesus does is be brutalized.
And, you know, Mel Gibson, the only other movie of his that I've seen is Hacksaw Ridge,
Yeah.
you know,
which is
I have
another,
no interest in
like, punishingly violent movie. And it's so strange, like, the way he chooses to use violence. Like, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, okay, he's one of the few directors who's interested in, like, depicting, like, the true, like, horror of violence without any real irony attached to it.
Yes.
But at the same time, he seems to just revel in it. You watch
There is
this
a lot of
movie,
titulation in this movie.
you watch this movie, and it's like almost torture porn. That scene of Jesus getting whipped, that to me was the hardest part of the movie to watch. And
Yeah. It is just bizarre for like a movie that like about Jesus when it's supposed to be about like love and forgiveness, and so much of it is dedicated to Jim Caviezel being turned into a piece of raw meat.
like, is the only point of this movie to be like, hey, he did this for you?
think about this next time you lie about eating that piece of pie in the break room.
Think about it next time you masturbate. He died for your sin.
Yeah. Like, I'm almost inclined to say that, like, this is not a movie.
No.
It's not. Well, even in the story that it's telling, if you even just go back to, like, Palm Sunday as the basis, as the beginning of this story in the Bible, you know, go as far. No matter how bit you frame, this is Act 3 of any Jesus story you're telling.
Yeah, and which is why maybe that's also why like I felt like watching. I was back to like watching Seuss or one of like those appalling like Nazi propaganda films where the only story there is in messaging and in coding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say this is anywhere near as appalling a movie as that, but when it stands at the 2000s, I can't think of much more appalling movies.
It's such an unpleasant viewing experience.
And I don't know why.
You have to imagine like country Christian moms watching it.
Yeah, and the thing is, because I know plenty of people who, like I said, this is like, I asked people in high school, I'm like, do you watch R-rated movies? They go, no, only Passion. Like, I know people who saw this when they were like 10, like in church groups, like with parents and stuff. I'm just like, oh my God, is this really what you want to build the pillar of faith around? Is just, Jim Caviezel turning into ground beef?
Maybe we shouldn't trust the country with anything. Good lord! Like the things this has to say about the Christian right are only bad.
Yeah. Like it has no perspective on what it's depicting other than what has already been said 1,000 times for 1,000 years.
There's no mythology in it. Strangely enough.
No, it already like buys into like everything that has been previously established and is like, let's just visualize it and like kind of dramatize it.
But also, Lady Satan.
Oh, yeah.
Oh God, this like, might be the dumbest Satan I've ever seen put the screen.
With the extension of the Satan baby also that comes up a couple times.
The Satan baby. Good lord.
That like eats Judas and also is like being carried. Of all the places to get artsy in this film, your depiction of Satan, really, that's where you're going for it.
And like early sign, by the way, that like Mel Gibson like does not understand what he's doing. That scene in Gethsemane when they come to arrest him and like Peter cuts off the guy's ear and it turns into this like handheld slow-mo action scene. Why?
This movie looks like a really gory TV movie.
Yeah.
Like this is really poorly directed. Yeah, like there's a ton of slow-mo and it's all terrible. So like I can't even like defend this as like a visual creation because as a visual creation it's appalling. It's terrible.
It's unpleasant is the easiest word.
Unpleasant, but in a way it doesn't realize.
Yeah. And as much as Mel Gibson like can insist that like he wanted to do it this way to like really, you know, drive home the enormity of the sacrifice and the promise of forgiveness and dying for our sins. Like, man, you know, intercutting like this graphic violence with minute 32nd at most of Jesus teaching. Like, what message are you expecting to get for us to get out of this?
He's stepping on his own toes. Like, if you really want to show the torture and just, like, really put us through the ringer, then just give us an hour of uninterrupted, like, Jesus just getting put through the blender. And then the structure is so terrible that he's just like, this is when you put in the characterization. You break it up. He's defeating his own purpose by putting these terrible little inserts in.
I get the feeling like this movie was just like Jesus torture porn, and then somebody went to Mel Gibson like, hey, I think we need to like underline like the messages. I think we're already understanding the messages here, but I think we need to like place just a little bit more context, put a little bit more of his teaching. So like,
I don't wanna. 30 seconds max. That's all you're getting.
and the way he intercuts it, it almost feels like he's mocking it. Like
there's something almost mocking about this movie. That's a really good way to put it.
You're like, oh yeah, okay, you wanted to save the world, you wanted to teach us love and forgiveness. Look how you're gonna suffer for it. Like, I truly think that like maybe his intentions were good, but he just truly had no idea how to do it properly.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Knowing Mel Gibson, I don't think there were good intentions.
What were your guys' favorite inserts? Mine was that time when Mary was watching him go through and he fell down, and that reminded her of that time when he was a kid and he fell down.
The favorite quote from my girlfriend watching this. If Jesus falls down one more fucking time...
No.
Like, we were having discussions about, like, man, like, why are the Romans doing this? This is just a terrible way to execute someone. It's just bloody. It takes too long. Just, like, just send the cross out there and just throw him on.
Just throw him up.
It's so
Throw him
inefficient.
on. Who cares? It's not like we're killing an emperor here.
Oh, man. Well, no, obviously the best cutaway in this film is Jesus the Carpenter inventing tall tables. and also the devil in the desert.
The devil in the desert.
When
I find myself oddly fascinated with Jesus the Carpenter in these films. I think because
yeah.
how good a person he is, or like how flawed he is as a character, is portrayed in his carpenter abilities in both. Because here he's perfect and flawless, as are his stroke of the grain and his architecture of the underframe of his IKEA tables, as opposed to Last Temptation, where it's a little more shoddy, like his character. He's flawed, like his woodworking.
Actually, we don't get too many depictions of Jesus the Carpenter in like our glass or like stained glass windows and like all our like statues of Jesus.
Yeah.
Maybe we need like one of the great cathedrals, New York, with like a little marble statue of like Jesus making a little high top table. Maybe we need that.
we need to get back to the Jesus as a carpenter.
As a struggling businessman.
That's the kind of stuff I want to hear. I mean, the synoptic gospels kind of gloss over that stuff.
What was his methodology for a dovetail wedge? This is where I would like to spend my time.
Who was Jesus' teacher? What kind of architectural mold was he working in?
Can I just say, I think my grandfather would like church even more if
whose grandfather wouldn't?
Man, if the Bible started just talking about architecture on end, I might read it more.
If it just went to if half of Acts was just like subtle biblical woodworking tips, like man,
like Father, Son, Holy Dovetail. It's perfect.
I think we have reached the point where you said the Passion of the Christ should not be viewed by human eyes.
Yeah.
It doesn't need... I feel bad saying that because it's such a touchstone of, like, 2000s culture and was such a big, like, moment in movie making, but wow, no one needs to watch this movie.
No, certainly not.
I think, again, I would recommend it in the same way I'd recommend, like, a Soviet propaganda film, or, like a really infamous film that, like, has, like, a lot of traction for some fucking reason.
It's like I don't know. I don't think any of you probably have done like the Stations of the Cross like on Good Friday or anything.
Oh no.
No. This movie is just that, like, but with more blood and guts. So there's no reason anyone even especially like the religiously like fervorous.
That's the thing I don't get. Is why
because all this really does is like, oh, sorry, Brady.
No, go on.
All this really does is like reiterate, like, Jesus, he existed, he died for our sins. Okay.
Yeah.
Watch, rinse, repeat.
Think
like,
about
that's,
it, though. Let this image sting you.
Whereas, like, here's like the Last Temptation of Christ really like digs into the mythology and really like says, like, hey, if this happened, what does it have to say?
And like, as Jesus as a character, as opposed to just
as a
some
symbol.
legend that you've heard 1,000 times.
So I think
this is the high top table.
the moral we're landing on here is Scorsese is a better filmmaker than Mel Gibson, which we really needed to do an hour-long podcast to figure out.
I think what I landed on is if you want to see how a movie's going to treat Jesus, watch the Carpenter scenes.
That'll be our next like cinematic project is Jesus the Carpenter.
Start writing it. All right, everybody. That was too much Christ.
Too much.
And it certainly was too much Christ. So, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We did this for you.
Just like Jesus.
Just like Jesus.
When do I get my movie about it that you don't want to watch, but people make you for some reason?
That about wraps it up for another one.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, motherfucker.
I just want to thank you for joining us, Brady.
Oh, I wouldn't have wanted you to endure these things alone. God knows where you would have ended up if you had.
I do appreciate it.
I also just send like a public thanks to my girlfriend for sitting through these things with me.
This Easter, celebrate the people in your life who are willing to sit through Passion with you.
Yeah, God, I think that might have been the most sacrificial thing she's done for me.
How appropriate.
How appropriate. So next time, we have not recorded that Howard Hawks episode yet.
No, so we're probably just gonna have to do that.
Yeah. I watched both those movies, so I'm very excited to talk about them.
I watched one. Are we gonna have positive things to say?
Which one did you watch?
I saw Bringing Up Baby.
Okay. Only Angels Have Wings, I liked more.
Okay, yeah, I really don't like Bringing Up Baby, and I'm going to spend that entire podcast episode kind of like figuring out why.
Okay, that's interesting. I liked parts of it. On the whole, I was a little hit or miss, but we'll get to that later.
But again, Howard Hawks a bit later than we wanted, but my schedule is really fucking me sideways.
But hey, there's always room for Jesus.
There is
Leave room for Jesus in your film watching schedule.
Oh man.
Well, this is the only thing we had to record that really had to come out at a certain time.
Yeah. So you'll probably be hearing this before I even get that Glengarry Glen Ross episode out.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you all for joining us for this.
Thank you for enduring the Hack Fraud Show.
And we'll see you next time.
And I'm going to put it all in this.
To the left.
Okay, then.
In a box labeled to the left. So
Maybe that's for the best.